My name is Jeremy Leinen. I'm the executive chef at Country Club of Rochester in Rochester, New York. The club was founded in 1895, I believe. Hope I'm remembering that right. I've been with the club for about a year.
Talk to me about in your line of work. We've talked to a couple different people, but not necessarily in the country club and area aspect of that. It's a whole different ball game when it comes to that. So kind of talk about the high pressure, those big events and the different types of pressure that goes on there, and working the situational management that you have to work through with those emotions and stress.
Yeah. So, I think one of the sort of the running jokes in the club industry, at least among chefs, is, we talk about standards, and, every operation, you want to have a SOP for, really everything that you do, ideally. But, club chefs will joke as far as, okay, well, what's the standard for this? And they'll say, well, I don't know, what member is it? So, because you'll get, I've run into this a few times over the years, where you'll have a member, a very much a grown man that can't have any of their food touching on their plate. So we'll jokingly refer to this as a big boy plate. But where, it's, you said it right with, situational awareness. And the one thing that's different in clubs is the member's name is on all the tickets when the orders get rang into the kitchen. And so we have to make sure that we pay attention to that, because, I've seen all kinds of things from, there's one member that, they ate at the club 3, 4, 5 nights a week, and their daughter had just a lot of different food allergies that we had to be very, very cognizant of. They had their own salad dressing. There was a special ketchup that we kept on hand for them, things like that. I've had other members where as soon as we saw that name, we knew to go ahead and put all of their plates for their entrees in the oven as soon as we started cooking the food, because this guy would literally reach around the table to all the plates with everybody that he was eating with. And if it didn't burn his hand, he would send the entire table's food back. So yeah. I mean, clubs are a very, very different beast with that. I mean, like, I could go on for a while with some of these stories, but I think that paints a good enough picture for most people.
No, it does. And I'll get back to the situational awareness. I have a couple I'm going to touch on there, but for myself, it being in the beer world, when I was representing the breweries, I had developed a program called Beer School, and it was a beer dinner program back when that was becoming really popular. So that was, 2011 to 2016, 2017, we were doing those, and it was always awesome, to be honest with you, when a country club was open to doing it, because they had a lot of fun, because it wasn't the standard thing that they did. And I always felt like, they broke the tradition and they broke the formula. And I think that was one of those interesting parts to what, going and working in the back end. And then in the back end, like you said, I was amazed at watching the back of house work with every single one of those SOPs you're talking about. It's just, doesn't matter where you are. Anybody that works in the club aspect is feeling that customization and that bespoke lining and everything like that. So
absolutely.
Not to mention, I the first time I went, I didn't have a jacket, so I had to. Even though I was the presenter, I had to go to the local Coles and buy a jacket, because the one that they had in the Lost and Found wouldn't fit a 6'3", 300-pound guy. Right. I had a Chris Farley moment with the one I got in Lost and Found the first time I went in. So, with that said, walk me through kind of one of your most memorable times where things just went sideways and the team just rallied, pulled together, and just kind of. You just really see the back of house, really work with the front of house, and just that magic orchestra coming together.
I think one of my favorite stories about that would have been Easter about 12 years ago. So I was at a club in Charlotte, and springtime in clubs in the Southeast is crunch time. That April, May, first half of June. Everything is just firing on all cylinders. You've got weddings, you've got golf season picking up, and everybody's trying to do everything all at once in this, roughly 2-month period. And, Easter is kind of, the kickoff weekend, depending on when it falls. And, we we had a couple people out on vacation. I think maybe somebody was out sick. I don't really remember, but we were a little shorthanded that week, and it was a really, really busy week at the club. I think we were feeding 800 or 900 people for Easter that weekend, and we had events all week long, and we didn't so much as dice an onion in preparation for Easter until about 9 o'clock on Friday night.
Oh, wow.
So definitely getting a late start compared to what we would want to do. And I think I was 26 or 27 at the time. I was a madman. I didn't sleep much. And, the 15 or 16-hour days didn't really faze me. Didn't necessarily like them, but it didn't faze me the way they do now. And honestly, we got into work Saturday morning, and fortunately it was a pretty quiet day, event wise. So it was just a big prep day. And I don't necessarily know how we got everything done. Because essentially everything for Easter Sunday had to get done on Saturday, because that just how the week went, and everything was coming together. I was feeling pretty good. It's about 9:30 Friday night. We're finishing up the fruit platters. It's like the last thing that we got to do, and that's when things came off the rails. We ordered in fresh passion fruit. And I don't know if you've ever seen a fresh passion fruit before, but they look kind of like a small avocado, but the skin is really leathery. And, it's that point in the week. My knife's not as sharp as it was a couple of days ago. And I'm going to cut this fresh passion fruit open, and the knife slips off the skin and goes into my thumb. And everything went from feeling pretty good to I couldn't get my thumb to stop bleeding. Like, I filled up a finger cot like a water balloon. And I remember, I finally had to pull the finger cot off, and the chef sees me, and, a water balloon looking thing full of blood comes off my finger. I think his face went white. I ended up having to go to the ER, and it's Saturday night, and there's homeless people in there yelling, and 4 hours at the ER. And by the time I got home, it's 3:30 in the morning or whatever it was. And, I needed to be in at like 7, and I'm thinking, well, I'm not even going to go to sleep. Ended up dozing off for maybe 45 minutes, got up, went in early. The chef oversleeps. And he was usually the first one in on big holidays. And, it turned into just like this comedy of errors. I cut my finger, and then the chef oversleeps. He ended up being 2 hours late. But fortunately, I went in early, earlier than what I would have, and got everything going. And it was one of those things. Like, I don't even know how we did it, but we did. It was a brutal week, but it was a great week at the same time.
That's awesome. And with, like, in the world you're in, you're constantly developing kitchen layouts and event layouts, and working through the efficiency of your kitchen, while also all those customizations that you have to deal with. And that's not, I don't look at them as a challenge as much as an opportunity. And I know you look at it the same way. As much as it can be a pain in the ass, it's also one of those, it's an opportunity to engage with the guests and your members and stuff like that. So with that said, where do you get that drive, and where did that drive come from to have that patience? And that patience being, whether not from a negativity of outside, but like patience in building something from scratch, because you're constantly having to rebuild different programming or menus and things like that. So,
well, I think it's a couple of things. For one, the patience for this stuff wasn't necessarily always there. I think that's something that took some time and maturity to get to. But I think part of the realization that you have to come to is that, if the Ronco set it and forget it management system existed, they wouldn't need me, and I wouldn't be getting paid what I am. And so, that's part of it. But I think a big part of it is just learning how to take the ego and the emotion out of it. And Interestingly enough, I actually just was reading this earlier this week, that age-old expression that the customer is always right. That's actually only half of what that saying actually is. And the actual saying is the customer is always right in matters of taste. And so if it's kind of like, if it tastes better to them to have the sauce on the side, or to get it with spinach instead of broccoli, or whatever it is, that they tend to hit us with sometimes, well, then, I mean, they're right to prefer it that way. So just do it. And, just having to learn, like, why do we even let that stuff bother us in the first place?
I love the way that you brought that up and flip the entire perspective on it, because it's something that, so I talk about this a couple times, is the neurogastronomy, and that kind of like when you're consuming something, it hitting a memory and a core memory, and then that's kind of bringing that experience for you. So with that said, I've never thought about it that way. I'm in the moment here, actually, like thinking about what you just said is like, yeah, what originally caused that societal thing where we were looking at that as an inconvenience, when really you're right. Everybody's taste is different. And the only way you can achieve success in the transaction of providing value to both sides of the parties. Yeah, that's a really interesting way to think about it.
Yeah. I mean, that doesn't completely discredit the fact that, if you're a busy restaurant on a Friday night and every ticket has red ink all over it in terms of everything being customized, I mean, that presents legitimate challenges in terms of being efficient and being able to get food out quickly. So, I look at it from both sides. I mean, I think, if you're a paying customer, I think within reason, you deserve to be able to get things the way that you want. But, as an operator, I also acknowledge the consequence of that when it's on a large scale. So, but I think I'm past the point of like being frustrated by it. I might chuckle sometimes at some of the things people ask for, but I don't get mad about it anymore.
I'm finding in my in my latter time now, approaching the just crossing the 20-year mark in my industry, that the amount of stuff I laugh at all day long that I used to like, that used to just set me off for like, I would lose probably 20 minutes or so just steaming over somebody. And it might last 15 seconds. So with that part said too, tell me some of your secrets on managing your staff. I mean, it is that situational awareness we talked about earlier, and then you're managing a staff that is all degrees of levels. So you have everybody that might be a language barrier to entry level, to an age difference of someone that might be in the elder years, to also somebody who might be just out of high school. It's like, and then everything in between. And how do you, again, talking about customization and that bespoke, you almost have to do that all over again with the way you manage your team.
Yeah, no question. I think, God, it's something I'm still learning so much. And I think the biggest thing that I would say is that every staff that I've had has been unique compared to the others in terms of what their strengths and weaknesses were. And I think you really have to, or at least what I try to do, is not put too much on them too quickly. And I try to learn my staff and what they're good at and what they're not. And, we talk about the importance of being able to delegate, but, obviously we have to feel comfortable in what we're delegating. So, it would be pretty silly of me to delegate things to people that they're not ready to do, or, maybe they can't help me with very efficiently. So like, I had a staff in Atlanta, that, my club there, that, these guys, when it came to just being on the line and pumping out volume, they got it done. And they didn't necessarily need a whole lot of help to do it. They weren't necessarily the most detail oriented when it came to prep work, and they weren't necessarily the most engaged in maybe some of the creative sides of things, in terms of wanting to come up with a special or things like that. But that's okay because I didn't have to worry about them during service. They just got it done. Versus I had a club in Chicago that was almost entirely, the staff was almost entirely Hispanic. Some of them spoke great English, some of them maybe not quite as good. And so, you had to kind of work through some of that language stuff, which was interesting. Those guys were awesome when it came to like production work. You needed prep work for banquets, hit them a list, they would bang the stuff out. They were phenomenal with that. Maybe not so great as much with some of the more intricate stuff. But I didn't have to worry about basic banquet prep with those guys. So, I could put those things on them and, stuff for the special that I was maybe more interested in doing. I would just do that stuff versus, the staff that I have here in Rochester, we're not as high volume of a club. So these guys maybe not as skilled as some others that I've had in that regard in terms of just pumping out volume, but in terms of being able to take on more intricate prep work, and being trainable in those regards, they've been great with. I have the staff in one restaurant that I will basically treat it as an assignment for them to come up with the insert menu every week. And so maybe there's ingredients in season or there's some stuff we have laying around, that I'll come up with a market basket for them, or maybe there's something that I want them to learn how to do. And, I'll pull a book out, put it in front of them, like, here, look this up, tell me what you learned. We're going to do this next week. So I want you guys to dig into this a little bit. But long story short, I think, I've learned to not have a one size fits all approach with the staff because, it's, however many people, it's however many different personalities, it's however many different backgrounds or whatever it is. And you got to kind of meet them where they are, and then move with them from there.
How do you, with your experience and everything like that, and your creativity in the building of the like with the menus and things like that, do you ever run into obstacles being in the private club area where that routine gets sucked into certain things, or do you feel like people are very receptive to the changes, and whether it's a menu change or a special or something like that? How do you navigate that from a flow standpoint?
So, it really depends on the club with some of that. I was at a club in Chicago following a chef that had been there for 20 years. Change was a little hard to make happen there. Versus, the club that I'm at now, I think they were a little hungrier for change. Just very, very different narrative that I was coming into, versus, my club in Atlanta. I think I recognized relatively early on that, there were certain things where there were opportunities for change, but then there's also things that, and this is true of every club, where there's certain things you just don't mess with. If the French onion soup has been made a certain way for 20 years, just leave it alone. The chicken salad is always a hot button one that, I changed it at one club in Atlanta.
I love that it doesn't matter where that is. It's an issue.
Yeah, God. One club in Atlanta, I changed the chicken salad, and the ladies wanted my head because it had onions in it. And then, I changed it at another place, and they actually liked it. And, it's just.
Are you raisins, no raisins, and almonds? How do you? Where do you go with that one? Let's go with where is your what mountain would you die on with your chicken salad?
Well, I'll be honest. There's actually not a whole lot of hills I'm willing to die on, to be honest with you. When it comes to the chicken salad, my preference is to roast whole chickens and, pick the meat off the bone and make it that way. Usually once a year, I like to fire up the smoker with whole chickens, and I do a really nice smoked chicken salad, where I actually make a apple cider vinegar sabayon with the egg yolks and sugar, and that gets folded into the mayonnaise, and it's just really rich and delicious. And I'll put grapes and apples and things like that in there. But for a standard, house chicken salad, it's pretty simple. Like, I haven't touched the recipe here yet. I don't know if I'm going to, but I would say mine is pretty standard. But there's just a little bit of Dijon. There's a little bit of lemon juice. There's a sprinkle of Old Bay in it, and it's just a little bit to make it a little bit more interesting without it not tasting like mom's, which I think for a lot of people that's really what it is.
That's the funniest thing, because we had I had a pretzel shop it's now all online now, but we originally started as a retail shop, and we were brick and mortar, and we were across from a courthouse, so we did a lot of lunch business, and that was always the number one, like, in the complaints. It was that they always knew when what days certain people were making the chicken salad, and that was like,
right.
We never forecast like correctly on how much to produce, because it didn't matter, and we weren't seeing it, that it wasn't, and we were like, we weren't connecting that it was the person, it wasn't the actual chicken salad. Okay. So you're like looking at like, why do my numbers drop so much? And you're like, oh yeah, it's who's working that day. So and it's directly related to the chicken salad.
It's always the silliest things.
Exactly. Tell with that said, and some silly things, we've all, we seem like we're around the same age. We grew up watching the movie Waiting, and we've all lived in that world. What's your funniest back of house story so far in your career? You don't have to share names or anything like that.
Funniest story, bar none. I had a prep cook, Mexican lady named Margarita in Atlanta. She was awesome. She was a little firecracker, full of piss and vinegar. She was awesome, but like, there were certain things you just didn't try to push with her. Like, just let her be, and she'd get the work done. Just don't mess with her. But there was one day that my executive sous chef told her he needed her to make some salsa. He said, but be careful. Don't make it too spicy. Don't go crazy with the cilantro. He said, this is gringo salsa. Okay. And she looked him dead in the eye and said, if you want gringo salsa, then you can make it yourself. It was epic.
That's really good. That's good. Now that's a mountain to die on right there. Yeah. With that part too, like walk me through, like, you're running let's say a couple hundred people event. You said you have 800 or 900 people there. Let's go through, like, walk me through somebody that's never been behind the door of like a Christmas party, or like some sort of a holiday event, like all the different moving parts, as much as you can paint that picture audibly.
Yeah. So
you're walking in, like, what time's the event, and then what time are you walking in the door, and then give everybody like a little behind the scenes. Yeah.
So I guess probably the coup de grace of events that I have worked in my career, Charlotte Country Club that I worked at, our annual Christmas ball for the membership was the first Saturday in December, and we're talking one of the best holiday parties in the country. When I was there 2 years in a row, they had the same band that did Obama's inauguration ball. Nice. We're talking just one hell of a party. Full open bar. There's a different food spread in every room. So you get into this, and we had essentially like 4 different menus that were being executed at the same time. So you had one room that was a big seafood spread that would have, oysters, shrimp cocktail, sushi, a couple hot things, maybe you're out there searing scallops, a couple other things beyond that probably. And then you would have one room where you would have your carving stations. You would have maybe some mini chopped salads, some various little side dishes, what have you. There would be past appetizers going around. And then there was one room that was all dessert. And I worked with a pastry chef that is pound for pound the best chef that I've ever been around, period. Guy's an absolute monster. He's insane. He would probably have 30 different desserts on this buffet because he always had to be an asshole and one up everybody else. Every event we ever did. And then there was a late night kind of bar food display that was downstairs with, maybe it was like house-made Cracker Jack balls, a couple different sliders. There might be a taco buffet, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, it was all hands on deck. Every inch of space in that kitchen was being used. And you had, multiple ice displays being delivered.
Wow.
So, you had to coordinate delivery of those, which preferably they're coming there and they're doing setup. So if event starts at 7, those are probably being delivered at 5:30. Staffing wise, there was some of us probably there at 8:00 in the morning, even though that event didn't start till 6:30 or 7. Prep wise, you're probably starting 3 days out on, getting the prep work done. The bulk of it's probably happening the day before. I mean, this was a party for upwards of 1,000 people. You're probably cooking 150 pounds of shrimp cocktail. Past appetizers like fried oysters were one of our staples there. We would probably have 25 or 30 gallons of those. And you would go through that in about an hour and a half. If your carving station was beef tenderloin, you were probably doing 30 beef tenderloins for the carving station for this party. We're talking just an astronomical amount of food that's happening. And, in the kitchen, I mean, I want to say we had, 25 to 30 staff members. Probably every single one of them were on hand for that party that night. Maybe a couple of the AM guys weren't there, but everybody else was going to be there because it took everyone. But you get into the party starts at 6:30. Okay, so I want the beef tenderloins out of the oven resting no later than 6. We've got all this cold food that's bowled up, plattered up, what have you. We need to start getting that out by 5:30 so that we're ready. You're really kind of going through a detailed prep list, a detailed, just item list for everything that you have. And then, you're also putting times next to everything in terms of, when it needs to be out or what time certain things need to go into the oven. Your prep lists all week long, it can't be just make the crab cakes. It's, how many crab cakes, your recipe that you're using, how much does a 1X of that recipe make? So is it a 4X? Is it an 8X? How many pounds of crab is that? So, and I mean, that starts really the week before in terms of just sitting down, going through everything that you're going to need and getting with, fortunately we had a purchasing manager at that property, but having him coordinate, the purchasing and, what day does it need to be here? Big events like that are a lot of work, just on some of that on the back end, so to speak, of just getting the product there, how much of it, getting the recipes pulled, figuring out your production timelines. It's a lot for sure.
I've had various glimpses of it in certain roles and stuff like that, and I'm always just overly impressed with how things are run, not just in country clubs, but just events in general. And with that said, too, I mean, it's like one of those things. The amount of hours you spend there is a lot, I'm sure. So with that, I mean, what do you do? What do you do in your off time? What are your priorities and what keeps you going?
So I mean, up until a couple years ago, I was a gym rat, but I hurt my back like 10 years ago, and I had, a flare up a couple years ago that's been, kind of tricky to get diagnosed and figured out. So, I've kind of had to put some of that stuff on hold, which, I want to get back to, but, I'm also a dad now. I've got, a 2-year-old. So, life is just a little bit busier. My head's just a little bit more full of stuff that I got to worry about. So, but you also have 2 dachshunds, so I'm kind of a homebody. I like, sitting on the couch watching TV with my dogs. I like, I do a little bit of gaming. I grew up playing Madden. I still like, firing up a game of Madden once in a while for, pick it up for an hour. It's a good way to just get away for a little bit. I also, I do a fair amount of reading, in my kind of off time. I mean, one of my, professional goals is to take the Master Chef exam. So, I spend a good bit of time, reading and taking notes just in terms of some of the prep work that goes with that. I'm relatively simple in that regard.
That's awesome, though. I was just interviewing yesterday. Victor, who's the former executive director for the Culinary Institute of America.
Oh, Helisay.
What's that?
Victor Helisay?
Yeah. So we were talking yesterday, and it was, I was telling him about I lived with a guy. I went to Drexel University in Philadelphia, and one of my roommates there, he was in the culinary school there, and then it was just amazing when he would when it was his turn to cook, he would just open up the cupboards and just create magic. And I always told him, I said it was like, those were the nights I never cared about doing the dishes. If he was cooking, right, I was always good to go. With what we were talking about there, like as far as where the future of kind of the evolutions of the food industry have come, there's a lot of SKUs, there's a lot of brands. How do you guys choose from a vendor standpoint and an ingredient standpoint and sort through the challenge that exists today between having a high quality product while also meeting a budget? Mm-hmm. How do you kind of balance that, and what are your kind of criteria priorities?
Yeah, I mean, that's a little tricky for me, like where I am right now. Rochester is a much smaller market compared to Chicago and Atlanta, for sure. With being in a larger market like that, you have, generally speaking, a lot of options in terms of being able to shop things around. And and it's, some of this stuff is funny how the Cisco mayonnaise and the US Foods mayonnaise are probably made by the same people, just with a different label on it, but one will be $6 a case cheaper for absolutely no reason. And so there's some things where, you just do your due diligence and you shop around. And if you're placing an order anyway, and there's an opportunity to save $6 on a case of mayonnaise, why wouldn't you do that? Obviously now and again, you'll get that case of mayonnaise or that case of canned tomatoes, and it's like, I don't really like these as much as I like the other ones. I don't know that it's worth saving $2 a case for. And I think that's perfectly reasonable. And there's, times when you're gonna order the other one and you're not gonna like it, and it's like, okay, we don't have to order that one again.
Right.
We did our due diligence. We tried it. It's okay. I think one thing that's been helpful to me is opting into some of the GPOs that are out there, because inexplicably, and this, I'll go back to like Cisco versus somebody like Performance, that I was working with in Chicago. For whatever reason, I could say the ketchup, Heinz ketchup, ordering from Performance with this GPO that I was using, it was literally half the price on a case of ketchup.
Wow.
And so we're talking at that point, $30 a case on ketchup. It was like total no-brainer to do that. And some of that has a little bit of a difference of, are you ordering those plastic tubs with the lid that screws back on, or are you ordering number 10 cans? But $30 a case isn't really worth me worrying about it being a number 10 can or this plastic container that I can put a lid back on it, right? So, for me, I think I always try to find where value and quality meet. I think there's certain things where, it's maybe not worth the headache of trying to save a couple bucks a case on something, case in point, it was a couple years ago. We did a lot of poke bowls at this one place that I worked. And so the frozen ahi grade tuna that we would buy, one place had it in the saku blocks, and the other place had it just cut into like little steaks. And it was a difference of like $5 a pound. And it was one of those things where, well, God, for a difference of $5 a pound, I've got to order a case of this and just see how it is. It turned out that just the way it was cut and the way it was trimmed, that there was a little bit more silver skin there than the other stuff did. And you could still save money that way, but you had to be very vigilant about trimming this stuff off. And it really just created more work for my cooks.
Right.
And it ended up just not being worth the headache for me to do this. So, I mean, I think you just got to, be reasonable and just sort of sort through some of these things and just make rational decisions.
I think that that's what always fascinates me about kitchens and being people in positions like yours is that art and the science that exists in running the business, but also every single situation is going to be customized and different. And it's like every minute is different, every hour is different, and you have no way to truly tell what's going on. With that said, from a fun standpoint, what do you think the most in all your different country clubs you've been at is? What do you think the most expensive item that was wrung out was? A cocktail or an entree? And do you remember what that might have been? Random question, I know.
I mean, as far as the most expensive item, I mean, we did. I mean, the club I was at in Chicago, they were not price sensitive at all. And so, if I needed to charge them, $70 for, a big like dry aged ribeye or something, they were okay with that. So that's probably the most expensive item that I've seen.
I was at a bar one time, and it was a cocktail that was $49 or something like that. And I was like, man, it was at a country club. And so,
Wow.
I looked at the menu and I saw it was like more expensive than anything else on the menu. And I said, I've never seen that before. But they did a lot of them. They said, so it brought that status, I guess, when you're dropping that on that.
Interesting.
2.5, 3.5 ounces. Yeah.
Right.
So what about you? Do you cook by yourself, and like what kind of food do you like personally? I know it's you could be everywhere.
So I don't cook for myself at home that often.
I was expecting that answer. You're all right. You're good.
So, like oddly enough, my wife and son still live in Chicago. We're just, dealing with that transition and making that work. So I don't really cook unless my wife is here visiting. It's a little bit more sensible for me to cook for the two of us versus just cooking for me. But as far as, what I like, I mean, God, one thing I love that I actually haven't had in quite a while now is like some good Vietnamese food. Like I love a good bowl of pho and a banh mi. Like it's, in my opinion, the best soup and sandwich combo anywhere in the world is that right there. So, I mean, that's something that I love to go get. I think probably the thing that I enjoyed the most about living in Chicago is that, I mean, yeah, it's got a world-class food scene, and you can go downtown, and it's, in a lot of ways, it's a lot like being in Manhattan. I mean, there's all the kind of high-profile restaurants, and if you want to go drop $1,000 on dinner, you can do that. But I think the one thing that the Chicago food scene does so well is just humble working people food. Chains like Portillo's and the Italian beef. It's probably one of the biggest things I miss about Chicago is the Italian beef sandwiches. Like I love them. I could eat one every day.
Really, when you first started saying Chicago, my mouth started salivating thinking about that.
Yeah. I mean, so, it's stuff like that I really enjoy, or, I mean, sometimes just plain old steak and potatoes is fine by me. I mean, like I like fancy restaurants, but like that's kind of a special occasion thing. It's not necessarily what I crave when I'm in the mood for something. You know, give me some good pizza, and I'm happy. I think one thing that oddly enough that I'm not really with in some of the trends is one of them that I just don't get is the whole burger thing. And like, don't get me wrong, like I like a burger, but I don't get so emotionally invested in burgers the way
How we're giving an entire page in the menu to them.
Yeah, I mean, and like there's this one place in Chicago called Au Cheval, famous for burgers. I think they've got one in New York City too. But people will wait for hours to get into this place and get a burger. And like right before I left, I went because I had to find out what the deal was.
Absolutely.
And fortunately, it was wintertime. I didn't have to wait too long. I mean, it's a pretty good burger, but I don't understand the fuss,
The one time I was at I was with a client, Star Hill Brewery down in Virginia, and it was this place called, and I can still remember it. It was called Jack's something Burger House, and just anybody in Charlottesville or Richmond area, I think that's where we were, and it was exactly, I was having the same exact conversation with them there because that's all they did was crazy burgers.
Okay.
I was telling them, I'm like, how is this a thing? Like, how are you turning tables? How are you whatever? And he didn't even say anything to me. He goes in the back and he comes up and he slides this burger and he's like, just eat it. And I bit into it and I'm like, it was a peanut butter and jelly burger with like jalapeno and habanero.
Oh no.
And I was, and it was weirdly good, but I would never order it. And that's
Right.
that's what I tried to explain to him. And he totally got on the same page with me. He's like, it's one of those things where like certain foods, it's one of those foods where like you got to clear all your brain out of it and get into it. And I said, okay, I never thought, that I would think of burgers that way, as like something like wings, like where it's like 7,000 different sauces and all
Right.
that.
Right.
They had a place in Philly that I thought was going to be a trend nationwide. And it was called Rock's Burger. And it was in a town of Roxborough in Philadelphia, the little borough. And what they did was they took whatever ingredients you ordered and put it inside the burger and then put it in on the grill.
Gotcha.
And I was, man, it was like, I started doing it at home and it was just like, it was, I thought it was going to be a new wave, but it was just me, I think.
Okay.
But hey, I appreciate you taking the time, and I want to thank you for being open to the experience and hopping on here.
Absolutely.
I don't think this is the last conversation we're going to have. I appreciate it, and if there's anything, you'll keep on the emails and stuff like that. But as of anybody that wants to connect with you, as far as breweries, wineries, distilleries, food people that want to come in and say, hey, I'd love to talk to you or collaborate with you, how do they reach out to you?
So yeah, they can find me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active on there. Unless you're trying to sell me a security system and you're going to send me a free coffee mug, I'm usually pretty good about
you didn't get my mail. Like I pen and my notepad. I thought I mailed it to you.
God, you wouldn't believe how many of those that I get. And it's like, no, I don't want your coffee mug and I don't want to talk to you. So, but yeah, they're certainly welcome to find me on LinkedIn.
Tell them to start a podcast in order to get your attention. No, but thank you very much, Jeremy, for that. And we'll make sure to put the website in there. And anybody that's in the Rochester area, definitely, if you're in the industry and want to connect with somebody that is paying attention to what they're putting on their menu and wants to enhance the customer experience, definitely reach out to Jeremy.
Sounds good.
Excellent. Hey, thank you so much again for your time today. You take care, man.
Yeah, thanks. You too.
If you have a story to share or you know someone with an inspiring journey, the FreeMind Podcast wants to hear from you. Submit your story or nominate somebody to be our next guest. Check out our website, thefreemindpodcast.com, and be a part of the conversation that truly matters.